So I think right now there are three major vulnerabilities of the American military, and I'll just go one by one. But the first is political will, the lack of political will, meaning that the American population is not supportive of this war. Close to 80% of Americans oppose a first strike against Iran, and only about 40% of Americans today still support the military operation against Iran. So that's the first issue. Second issue is the lack of manufacturing capacity. So to fight a modern war, you need to produce a lot of munitions, a lot of missiles, a lot of tanks. And unfortunately, what America chose to do was offshore its manufacturing capacity, its factories, to China. And so that's going to be a major constraint on America's capacity to sustain this war as it drags on. So that's number two. Number three is that America is not willing to sustain casualties, and because it looks bad on TV. And already people are not supportive of this war. So if Americans start arriving back home in body bags, then you can imagine major protests across the nation. So these are the three major constraints on the American military. What I will do now is explain to you why each is problematic. Okay? So the first is the idea of political will. And the reason why political will is important is that in order to win a modern warfare, you have to move towards something called total war. Okay? And what total war is, you structure your entire society to winning the war. Your industry, your culture, your political system all have to be focused on doing whatever it takes to winning the war. So last time America fought a total war was, of course, World War II, and possibly the Korean War. But World War II is a classic example when the entire American industrial base shifted from making cars to making tanks. And that's what you have to do in order to win, because wars take a long time. They take a lot of resources. Your entire population has to be behind it. And unfortunately, Americans grew up watching the Persian Gulf War in 1991, and then the 2003 Iraq War. And these were quick, simple wars that demonstrated America's technological supremacy. It was like a video game. And so the American population is sort of spoiled. And it's become indifferent to war and believe that, okay, you know, it's going to cost us a lot of money, and it's not moral, and it's terrible that these civilians overseas are going to die, but it's not really our problem. So, in other words, I doubt whether or not the American population is willing to make the sacrifices necessary in order to win this war.
Is this concept of the aura of invincibility that America has?
Right, okay. So the idea of the aura of invincibility is how America projects power, right? So America doesn't want to fight a war. America just wants to scare people. And so the way that America has fought wars these past 20 years is using three pillars, okay? These three pillars are aerial supremacy. So Americans don't send in ground troops. They just attack from the air. And you can't really do regime change from the air. You have to do it from the ground. So the way they compensate for this is by using proxies, right? So you look at the wars in Libya and Syria, where these rebel groups, these insurgents, were supported by American air power. Okay, that's number one. Number two is using propaganda. So controlling the media narrative through New York Times, through the CNN, through social media, trying to give the illusion that this war is just, this war can be won really quickly, and there will be no consequences to this war. And the third is the US dollar, which is that the Americans have the world reserve currency, therefore they can bribe anyone and everyone to do their bidding, right? So you look at the wars in Syria and Libya, where these insurgent groups were funded by CIA operatives with endless like cash bags, right? And these three pillars give the illusion of the aura of inevitability and invincibility, which is America cannot be defeated. The problem is that it's just an illusion. It's just theater, right? So when you run up against an enemy who doesn't care, who's like, I'm going to fight you to the end because I don't really believe you, and also I'm not afraid to die, and also you're attacking my home, and I'm not going to just surrender my home to you, then this illusion shatters. And that's the problem in Iran right now. And so when this illusion shatters, then you have to move towards total war, which is, okay, now I have to commit my resources to actually winning this war. And unfortunately, Americans aren't willing to do that yet, right? So the classic litmus test is gas prices. How much are Americans willing to pay for gas prices? And, you know, if right now your concern is gas prices, it probably means you don't really care about winning this war, right? Because if this war continues, it's not just gas prices that are the problem. It's going to be a national draft. It's going to be economic collapse. It's going to be riots in the streets. It's going to be almost civil war in America. That's what you have to do if you actually want to win this war. That's how wars are fought and won in the modern age. Total commitment, total focus, in win this war. And again, the question is, do the Americans have political will to fight and to win this war? And this is a big question mark. And for America to muster political will, you would also need to see a radical transformation in American society, from one that's a focus on more liberty, individual rights, to more authoritarian mechanisms. The national draft, of course, is the classic example. And so there are ways that you can muster political will. Okay, so false flag operations are one way, right? So after World War II, right, what dragged America into World War II, Pearl Harbor. Before Pearl Harbor, most Americans were dead set against intervening in the wars in Europe and in Asia. But Pearl Harbor changed all that. It's possible that as this war drags on and more Americans die, then there'll be a surge of patriotism, and more Americans will volunteer to fight this war. It's also possible that as the economy gets worse and worse, as people lose their jobs, as the stock market falters, and people feel a deep sense of anxiety and desperation, they believe that it's important to maintain the empire. Okay, so these are all possibilities, but you will have to make the transition in order to sustain this war. And right now, we're not really sure if America is willing to make the sacrifices necessary. Okay, so that's one big question, political will. And you will need this in order to fight total war. Okay, so that's the first problem. Second problem is manufacturing capacity, right? So again, the issue is that these past 20 years, especially with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the coming of the unipolar moment, America has financialized, meaning that America is the world's hegemon, and so everyone wants to invest in America because they believe it's the safest and best place to invest. And so you have all this money coming from the Middle East, from Japan, from China, from Russia, from Europe. And so Wall Street takes this money and then recycles it into the American economy and creates all these risky financial assets called derivatives in order to recycle all this excess capital, all this liquidity. This is what led to the 2008 subprime crisis. When Wall Street thought that it was invincible, it was too big to fail, it started to engage in all this sort of like risky behavior, and it collapsed the global economy. And it was only quantitative easing, the intervention of the Federal Reserve, that saved Wall Street as well as the American economy. But the problem with 2008 is nothing changed, right? I think that only one mid-level executive was put in prison. And in fact, there were many executives who got bonuses after they collapsed the economy. So we are still in a period in America where there's massive financialization, where it seems as though the entire economy is a Ponzi scheme. And so there are two major bubbles right now. There's the AI data center bubble, which is, these companies, 7 of them, spending trillions of dollars in building these data centers, creating a product that no one actually needs or wants, right? That's the first problem. Second is the private credit bubble, which is very similar to 2008 great financial crisis. So America is addicted to finance. Or another way of saying that is America is addicted to gambling, right? So if you're rich, you put your money in the stock market. But if you're not rich, if you're young, you gamble. Right? There's all these gambling sites now that are very popular, that are accessible.
Meme coins as well are a great example of financialization.
It's gambling, right? Cryptocurrency, gambling markets. It's all this get-rich scheme that's being promoted in America. So in order to fight this war, you can't do that because you need to move towards manufacturing. You need to move towards resource exploration and exploitation. And Americans don't really want to do the gritty work anymore, right? So back in the 50s and 60s, Americans were proud to be factory workers, to actually create stuff. And now I think that blue collar work is sort of like what illegal immigrants do. It's not what real Americans do. I'm sure there are lots of Americans who would love to work in a factory until they actually work in a factory and recognize how hard it is. So that's the second question. Are Americans willing to return to the factories and do the hard work of building the manufacturing sector in order to win this war? Okay, that's the second big question. Okay, and the third big question is this casualties. Are Americans willing to die in the Middle East? And the problem is that, again, Americans don't really know what war is, right? So, if you think about it, all around the world, if you fight a war, you lose the war, well, your kids die. You die. Your family dies. Your nation dies. The memory of who you are dies. War has consequences. But you know what? These past 40, 50 years, America has fought many wars, and it's lost many wars. It lost Vietnam. It lost Afghanistan. It lost Iraq. And the consequence for America is this. You have these 4-star generals put in front of Congress where for a couple of hours, they're harangued by congressmen and they feel kind of, uncomfortable. That's it, right? Like there's been real no consequences for America when America loses a war. And that is ahistorical. That's not normal. And unfortunately, this time it's different. If America goes into Iran with ground troops, if it's committed for 4 or 5 years, if America loses this war, it means the collapse of the American economy. It means the collapse of the global economy. And it means the collapse of the petrodollar, the American dollar as a world reserve currency. It basically means Americans are now poor. So these are 3 big questions. One is the nation able to unify politically around the idea of winning this war in the Middle East, to believe that it is a cause worth dying for? So the second question is America willing to transition its economy from financialization back to manufacturing? Which would actually mean radical social transformation. And the third big question is, how much sacrifice are Americans willing to make in this war? Are they willing to die in the Middle East? Okay.